This is going to be episode 4, as we're dealing with this timeline in Daniel and Revelation. I did videos 1, 2, and 3, and this is going to be the 4th one, and this is going to take us down to Revelation 17. And I'm just going to kind of give you guys some of my thoughts here. I haven't got it all figured out yet, but this is why I'm studying this. I want to understand. So if we look in chapter 13, we saw the papacy rise up, and the dragon, the Roman Empire, all the kingdoms over there in Europe, they gave their power and authority and everything over to the Catholic Church. And the Catholic Church reigned for 1260 years. Then Napoleon came, 1798, and he gave the deadly wound, which means the civil power of the kingdoms was taken away from the papacy, so they were no longer in charge. Then America's rising up at this time as they look like a lamb because they have religious and civil freedom. Republican, Democrat. No kings, no popes, all that good stuff. Some of the fireworks are going off, so. But as we think about that for a second, and then we go into Revelation 14, we see these wise virgins that give this 3 angels message, the final warning that seals God's people. And it's the final warning to the world to let them know that the only way to pass the judgment, the Son of God has got to be in us. And that Babylon's fallen. All the churches and denominations, they're all fallen. And we got to come out of them. So that's taking place. And then I kind of see the close of probation at the end of 14. Then we go to chapter 15, and it looks like we're going through the preparation of the 7 last plagues. The angel has the plagues. And then it ends with fire, there's smoke in the temple. And this is when Jesus' judgment is finished. Jesus would walk out of the temple, take off his priestly clothes, and he would put on his kingly robe. And he would gather up his angels, and he would set his GPS for the earth. Now, in the time that it takes him to leave heaven and come to earth to pick us up, that's that final time of trouble. He's not on the throne mediating on our behalf, so all of his people have to have overcome all sin in their life. This is what I'm seeing so far. So then we go to chapter 16, and we see the 7 last plagues are poured out. We see what happens, okay? This brings us to chapter 17. Now, I think this is... God is such a good teacher, because a lot of times he'll make a statement, then later he'll repeat something and he'll expand upon it. So I'm not quite sure what's happening here, but I want to go over this with you guys as we look at this. So that takes us to Revelation 17, and we're going to read it. And I'm going to stop, and I'm going to just give some thoughts. So let's start. 17 verse 1, it says, "And there came one of the 7 angels which had the 7 vials." Oh, wait a second, there we go. Okay, it's one of the angels that had the 7 vials, that had the 7 last plagues, okay? I think they're already poured out, I'm not sure, or they're going to be poured out. But notice what it says, "And talked with me, saying unto me, Come here, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters." Okay? We know the whore is the harlot, the whore church. It's the woman, it's Jezebel, it's Babylon. She claims to be Christian, but she's not. She's a deceiver. She's lying to the people. She has false doctrine. She's mixing error with truth, and she's also mixing together church and state because she wants access to the king's laws. She uses the king and the civil powers to dictate religious law. So, and this is why God's people always end up dying by the state government, because the church, she claims to be the Christian church, but she's not. It's a false church. Same thing with the Jews in Jesus' day. Okay, so let's continue. Verse 2, it says, now notice this, right here, it says, "With whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication." One more thing, you guys, she sits on many waters. We know in verse 15, it tells us that the water that the whore is sitting is peoples, nations, multitudes, and tongues. It's a highly she's sitting on the kingdoms, the people. She's ruling over them. Okay. And then you see here that the kings of the earth, what that represents the political powers, the lawmakers, the Congress, the Senate, all that stuff, have committed fornication because they unite church and state and they dictate religious law, and that's not a good thing. And the whole world, you guys, have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication, of Jezebel's fornication, the Catholic Church. What's the wine? That's her teachings, that's her doctrines, that she's confused everybody. This is why we got to go to the Bible to get the truth. So verse 3 says, "So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness." Now that makes me think the Dark Ages, right off the bat. That's kind of what I'm thinking. Because the woman goes into the wilderness for 1,260 days. We know that's the Dark Ages. But it says, "And I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns." We know a woman is a church. We know this is a Catholic Church. Okay. The scarlet-colored beast, we know Satan is the great red dragon. Okay. That was the Roman Empire back then, but this is talking about the final one. It's the final 10 horns. I think this has got to be the United Nations, but I'm not positive yet on that. But anyways, a woman riding a beast means a church is riding a kingdom, a civil government. Okay, she's in control. She's dictating her laws through that government, and she's using that government to enforce her laws. So we're definitely seeing church and state united there. And we know names of blasphemy against God, having 7 heads and 10 horns. The 10 horns gotta be, the United Nations, I believe, you guys, they've divided the world up into 10 regions. I seen that map that Pastor David Barron has been sharing, and I think that has something to do with it. It's because they're taking over the world. It's a global thing. The 7 heads would be the 7 world kingdoms from the time of Babylon all the way through up until the second coming. She's had 7 world kingdoms. Those are the heads of state. And then the 10 horns, that's the nations, the United Nations. It was like that in the days of the Roman Empire when it fell apart. Those 10 nations that it divided up into, they united together. They were United Nations, and what did they do? They gave power to the Pope. They gave their kingdoms all over to the Papacy, and they followed their doctrines. Just, the Justinian Code in 538 about the Trinity, and you have to believe it. You can't dare publicly oppose the Papacy. You got to do whatever they say. So that's interesting. But notice this, it says, "And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet." This is why the Vatican, the popes, and Catholic, their priests, they wear purple and scarlet. And they were decked with gold and precious stones and pearls. Very wealthy church, which they are, having a golden cup in her hand. Now, what do you think that cup is filled with? It's filled with wine, the fermented alcohol. It's filled with the error mixed with truth. It's her false teachings. They're the abominations. And there it says it's full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. Read Ezekiel chapter 8, you guys, and it talks about Israel, the abominations that Israel, God's people, what they committed. Sun worship's the worst one. That's a really cool chapter in Ezekiel chapter 8, though. But anyways, let's go to verse 5. It says, and upon her forehead, so this is her mind, okay, upon her forehead was a name written. What's a name? A name symbolizes character. But there was a name written, and it said, "Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth." You guys, that's huge. Now, let me tell you what I think about that. Upon her forehead there was a name written, mystery. That makes me think the mystery of the Trinity. That's the Catholic Church's foundational doctrine. All their doctrines are based on the mystery. They don't know God. It's a mystery to them. And Babylon the Great, Babylon, because she's Jezebel, she claims to be Christian, but she's not. Now, she's a mother of harlots. Now, this is why Rome is called the Mother Church. This is because. Now, who do you think her harlots are? She has harlot daughters that came out of her, but yet they all go running back to her in the end. It's all the Protestant churches. Isn't that pretty? That's amazing. So she is the mother of harlots. Think of the king, the woman, and the daughters. You always see those three antagonists against God's people. The king, the woman, and her daughter. It's always like that, and it's no different here at the end. Think of the story with Ahab, Jezebel, and the prophets of Baal. So, but let's continue. It says, "And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints." Now, she's drunk, you guys, with the blood of the saints. She's killing God's people through the state. And with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. So this woman is drunk with the blood of the saints, you guys. So she's killing God's people. And the angel said to me, "Wherefore did thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman, and of the beast that carries her, which has the 7 heads and 10 horns." Now, I'm a little confused with this one, because the mystery of the woman, that's Babylon, that's the whore woman, the harlot, the Catholic Church, and the beast that's carrying her, she's riding a beast, which is a kingdom. Now, you guys, the Catholic Church, now they are by themselves their own kingdom. They have their own government, the Vatican's their own country. They have their own money system. So I always got confused on that. But the beast that's carrying her, you guys, has the 7 heads and 10 horns. It's the civil powers of the world. It's the final, it's all the kingdoms of the world at the end of the world. This is what I'm thinking of the United Nations. The 7 heads are the 7 world kingdoms, and the 10 horns are the United Nations. So, something to keep an eye on as we're going through this. Let's look at verse 8. It says, "The beast," which we know is remember, the Catholic Church is a woman, but it's a beast also. It's both. That's interesting. But notice this, it says, "That thou sawest was and is not." It was, because it ruled during the Dark Ages, this church and state union, but it is not. Why? Because of a deadly wound, remember? Power was taken away, but that wound's going to be healed. And then it says, "And shall ascend out of the bottomless pit." That's interesting, because France came out of the bottomless pit too. "And go into perdition," which is just destruction. They're going to be going into their eternal damnation. "And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was and is not and yet is." You guys, because that's that final kingdom, because it yet is. It's not yet. It has no power yet. Because it's the final kingdom, you guys. It's the United Nations giving power back to the Papacy. It's the deadly wound being healed. The 7th and the 8th kingdoms. Isn't that cool? It's amazing as we ponder these things. But yeah, so everybody's going to be deceived on this, you guys, except for God's people, a little remnant of God's people. That's amazing. And it says, "When they behold the beast that was and is not and yet is." When that deadly wound is healed, the whole world's going to wonder after the beast, after the Catholic Church. Because the Catholic Church is going to have power over all the nations, the United Nations. Wow. And it says, now check this out. Here is the mind which has wisdom. Okay, we need the wisdom of God. We need Christ in us. It says the 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. Now this is all symbolic, okay? The 7 heads, which I've already kind of seen that they are 7 world kingdoms that the woman sits over. Okay, the woman has sat on Babylon at one point, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, then of course the Papacy was the big one, then the United States, then the United Nations. Yeah, it's amazing. On which the mountains are symbols of kingdoms in the Bible as well. So, to me, they're the 7 world kingdoms that Satan, that the woman, the false church, has sat on. Then it says here, and there are 7 kings. See, 7 kingdoms. This is what we're dealing with. This is what they are. 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. You guys, oh, that's my daughter. You see, the one that's not yet come, that's the final one. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. Oh, that's the deadly wound being healed, you guys, because check this out. We just went over that the 7 heads are 7 kingdoms. Okay? And then the very next verse it says there are 7 kings. Okay, a king has a kingdom. So there's 7 kingdoms. 5 are fallen, and 1 is. And the other is not yet. Check this out, you guys. The 5 that are fallen, we have Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, and the Papacy, the Roman Catholic Church. Those 5 are fallen. The one that is the Protestant Republic of America. That's the one that is. And the other is not yet come. When he cometh, he must continue a short space. The one that's not yet come, you guys, it's the Great Reset. It's the United Nations in bed with the Papacy. Going to take over the world. It's the final one. And it's happening. This is amazing. Now check this out. And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th and is of the 7 and goes into perdition. Now this is the Catholic Church. This is the Papacy here. Because look at the beast. We know the beast and the mark of the beast, that's dealing with the Papacy. Okay? So the beast that was, it was, because it reigned during the Dark Ages, and is not, because there was a deadly wound, so power was taken away from it. Even he is the 8th and is of the 7. See, he's the 8th because the United Nations, which are the 7th one, put him back in power. Put her back in power. Isn't that incredible? I never understood that until now. My goodness, that's incredible, you guys. In 8, you guys, the number 8's a symbol of resurrection in the Bible. This is why people were circumcised on the 8th day. This is why 8 people were resurrected, in a sense, from the flood. There were 8 people were saved. There were 8 authors of the New Testament. The resurrection. The Papacy is the 8th because the deadly wound is healed. And he's the 8th, but he was one of the 7. Because his wound is healed, he's put back into power. He resurrects back into power. Isn't that incredible? Wow. And here we go, you guys. Here's the United Nations. It's got to be. It says, and the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings. So 10, it's the 10 final kingdoms. And I think this is how the United Nations has divided the world into 10 regions. I think that's what this is speaking about, this Great Reset. Agenda 21. So the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kingdoms. Now notice this, they're 10 kings which have received no kingdom as yet. Because the United States is falling and the United Nations is soon going to take over. And when they receive their kingdom, it says, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. All the world, you guys, are all going to give power to the United Nations. And the United Nations is going to give that power to the Papacy and let them rule. Wow, that's the deadly wound being healed. You guys, it has to be. It makes perfect sense the more we look at this. And notice this, it says, these have one mind and shall give their power and strength to the beast. Go on the United Nations website, you guys. It's all about unity. It's all, They're of one mind. They all have the same agenda. They all have the same goals. They're of one mind, the mind of Satan, ultimately. This is the Agenda 21 Great Reset. It's amazing. It's the only thing that fits here. This is why the United Nations, you guys, they raised the Vatican flag in 2015. And they got in bed with the Papacy. And the Papacy's deceiving them. It's so sad. They're going to end up burning the Papacy with fire is what they're going to end up doing. But they're going to give their kingdom, their power, strength, civil authority, everything over to the Catholic Church. The Pope will reign as the Antichrist one final time. And then verse 14 says, "These shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them. For he is the Lord of lords and King of kings. And they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful." See, they're going to make war with God's people and ultimately with Jesus Christ himself. And he said to me, "The waters which thou sawest, where the whore sitteth." Now the whore, this false church, harlot woman, Catholic Church, she sits on many waters. Well, where the whore sitteth are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues, because she's sitting on the kingdoms of all the people. She's in charge of them. Incredible. Verse 16 says, "And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire." It's because the Bible tells us, you guys, that if a woman plays the harlot and plays the whore, that she must be burned with fire. So at some point, the United Nations, they're going to figure out that they've been lied to and deceived by the Catholic Church. And then they're going to burn her with fire, probably bomb the Vatican out of existence. Verse 17 says, "For God has put it in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree," notice this, "and give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of God shall be fulfilled." So you guys, God has put it in their hearts. Now they're all going to choose it, but he's put it in their hearts, you guys, that they are to give their kingdom, the United Nations, they are to give it over to the Pope and the Catholic Church. So this is going to happen. "And the woman which thou sawest is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth." That is Rome, and none other than Rome, you guys. Everything's going back to Rome, and the Romans are taking over. That's why it's called the Roman Catholic Church. It's amazing, you guys. Think of Daniel 2 with the iron and the clay. The iron is Rome, the clay is the church. So you have the Roman Church. That's why it's called the Roman Catholic Church. Catholic means universal. So it's the Roman Universal Church. It's the false woman. They have mixed all their pagan doctrines, you guys, and traditions, and brought them into the Christian church. And they're deceiving all God's people. I mean, this is where Christmas, Easter, the Trinity, so many doctrines come from this, you guys. They've all been passed down throughout history. And they've collected them and adopted them as their own beliefs and brought them into the Christian church. It's amazing. But this has to be the United Nations, you guys, giving power back to the Papacy. So I just thought that was pretty cool. I wanted to share that with you guys, but I'll put a couple notes on the screen. So, all right, well, God bless you guys, and I will see you in the next video I make. And may the Lord be with all of you. We'll see you next video.